This weekend marked the passage of the legislative coup that was Trump's big tax and spending bill. Now, I'm going to let you know, there were some cuts.
The Medicaid cuts alone could total roughly $930 billion, with at least 11.8 million people at risk of losing their health coverage.
It also cuts another $285 billion in food assistance.
An end to clean energy credits from the Biden era.
New caps on the amount that students can borrow in federal loans.
3 million poor people and kids will lose school lunch help.
I think that last one is supposed to read, 3 million poor people and kids will lose school lunch. Help! Just an intonation. It's a lot of painful cuts on a lot of vulnerable populations. But to be fair, at least America will finally make a dent on the deficit.
This mega bill will increase the deficit by $3.4 trillion.
What the f***? Holy shit! What? You somehow managed to severely cut the safety net and expand the deficit. That's impressive. That's one of those, hey man, how did you gain all that weight? Ozempic. That's something that's hard to do. I'm on Ozempic, and now I'm really fat. So even though some of our nation's most vulnerable are taking a pay cut, fear not. Other people are getting a raise.
There's $157 billion in new spending for the military and another $150 billion for immigration and border enforcement.
What? $150 billion for immigration and border enforcement? Are you telling me all this crazy shit that has been happening is broke ICE? Is that what you're saying? What is ICE going to do when they have real money? Oh, that's nice. They're going to do the Kanye diamond masks. Classy. But America's military and paramilitary weren't the only winners in this bill.
Changes to the tax code could benefit corporate America and manufacturers.
The bill features roughly $4 trillion in tax cuts, mostly for the wealthiest Americans.
The estate tax becomes permanent and more generous. The holy grail of this tax plan, the best part of it for businesses, is bonus depreciation. And all the private jet makers have been salivating over this possibility.
I'm not sure that liquid is saliva. But okay, the winners continue to be the winners. Either way, this bill was a big victory for MAGA. And Republicans were turned up.
It's fun to stay at the YMCA. It's fun to stay at the YMCA.
I'm sorry. That was the party they had for the Epstein List not being released. I'm kidding. That's not what that was. There was no list. There never was a list.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Is it really? The list is on my desk, but then I looked at the list and said, no list. Now, there's a lot of ways that we can walk through this tax and spending bill and how this bill encapsulates a ton of general Washington bullshittery. For instance, political hypocrisy. This bill was 970 pages. They jammed it through with barely any time to read it. How did Republicans feel about that when Democrats did it?
This thing is moving too fast.
People aren't even going to be able to read this bill.
They hope that nobody's going to take the time to read the bill overnight between right now and 8 o'clock in the morning when we're supposed to vote on it.
The determination of the White House and the Democratic majority to shove this down the throat of the American people.
Ooh. When it happens to them, it's shoving it down their throat. It's an outrage. But when it's for Republicans, it's just, come on, America. Relax the glottis, breathe through your nose. It'll all be over soon. And then we'll get brunch. Is it the glottis? I don't know. It was the funniest throat organ I could think of. Another way we can talk about this bill is Democratic fecklessness. They were utterly powerless to stop this turd of a bill, which makes them look terrible. The only thing that could make Democrats look even worse was bragging about the nothing they could do. Schumer tweeted this: "News! I just got the name struck off this bill with a move on the Senate floor." Oh shit, no you didn't. Seriously, tell me you didn't just brag about changing nothing about the bill but its name.
This is not a big, beautiful bill at all. That is why I moved on the floor to strike the title. It is now called The Act.
Are you trying to suck? Is that what this is? That's your move. We worked hard and took out the dumb name of the bill and named the bill after a prestige drama on Hulu. But at least Democrats still have Hakeem Jeffries over in the House. He's a younger leader. And he decided not to answer with words, but with imagery.
Hakeem Jeffries on Instagram. He's got a baseball bat and he says House Democrats will keep the pressure on Trump's one big ugly bill.
Hakeem Jeffries answered with imagery that sends a clear message to Republicans that Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats are waiting for their moms to pick them up from T-ball. They may... The Democrats may not have made the team, but they're ready to step in if a body is needed. Does anybody understand that intimidating, menacing photos are generally taken from below to make the subject appear larger, not from above? To make the subject appear, I don't know, 8 years old. The photo has to be intimidating. Make sure you get the upholstery in my leather love seat. They gotta know I have furniture. Or we could talk about the media's narrative dramatizing the fragility of Trump's ruling coalition and what that fragility could mean.
President Trump's agenda is in trouble.
Big trouble for Trump's beautiful bill.
President Trump's signature legislation on a knife's edge
hangs in the balance, hitting a major roadblock.
The margins are so tight here that anything could throw it into jeopardy.
It will be a nail-biter. There's no question about that.
The dramatic moment. Vice President Vance breaking a tie vote.
Oh, it surprisingly got through. Like every other f***ing thing Trump has wanted. From Qatari jet bribes to Epstein file secrecy to extorted media conglomerate protection money. I can't believe ABC paid that. That was so f***ed up. I'll let myself out. Sure, I wouldn't want to be ABC. But every time a new Trump's never getting that comes up, the media is blown away when he actually does get it, without ever acknowledging that the no votes from Republicans are scripted to allow certain senators plausible deniability without putting any part of that agenda actually at risk. It reminds me of the way every professional wrestling match gets the announcer slack-jawed with shock at the stunning turn of events.
If Jon Stewart showed up here tonight, I would force him to retire immediately because it is quite difficult to do a phony news show with your jaw wired shut.
Uh-oh, no way. Yes way. Jon Stewart. He did show.
Look at old Tubbs. What a surprise! I can't believe he showed up there like we rehearsed. It should have been clear that this bill, like everything else, was going to pass on the day they said it was going to pass, that the no's for the bill were for show, like Senator Josh Hawley's deep concerns.
This is real Medicaid benefit cuts. I can't support that. No Republican should support that. We're the party of the working class, Manu. We need to act like it.
You need to act like it. Did you act like it, Josh? Did you?
Hawley ended up voting for the bill. He put in a statement, quote, "I will continue to do everything in my power to reverse future cuts to Medicaid."
Oh, yes, future cuts. Everything in my power for future cuts, except voting no in the present. Or how about Senator Ron Johnson? You've got deficit concerns for the children.
I'm concerned about my children and my grandchildren and the fact that we are stealing from them. We are stealing from our children and grandchildren. $37 trillion in debt, and we're going to add to it as Republicans? That is unacceptable.
You'll never guess who accepted it.
Senator Ron Johnson flipped from a no to a yes.
Sorry, children and grandchildren. Maybe next future. Any other Republican who initially said, this is terrible, I'm not voting for this, and had an even dumber reason for flipping to yes? Tim Burchett from Tennessee. I'm looking at your dumb ass.
The president was wonderful, as always, informative, funny. Told me he liked seeing me on TV, which is kind of cool. Yeah, he signed a bunch of stuff. It's cool.
Well, was it cool? He signed a bunch of stuff for you. It was cool. Was that your class's first trip to Washington? He gave us M&Ms. I'll vote whatever he want me to vote for. He signed my tits. Whatever you want, I'll do it. By the way, nothing makes me distrust Donald Trump more than saying that guy is good on TV. It's all pro wrestling. The only difference between that vote and wrestling is that wrestling is fun and takes actual courage. And they didn't even get concessions to flip their vote. Only one senator apparently got meaningful concessions, and that's Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. And those concessions really wouldn't work anywhere else but Alaska.
Senator Paul said that that your vote was a bailout for Alaska at the expense of the rest of the country.
Oh my God.
That's what Senator Paul said.
This one was easy.
Senator, we've got the... I didn't say it, ma'am. I'm just asking for your response.
That's my favorite clip ever. She stares him down, and the reporter goes, I didn't say it. I don't know. I'm just, look, I don't even like this. Look, I wanted to work in the control room, but I'm handsome. So they put me out here because they didn't want this moneymaker to go to waste. But excluding all the fake narrative shenanigans and hypocrisies and fecklessness is the central truth of this bill. Once again, it's the bullshit gospel of austerity. The gospel they preach Anytime the country's finances are in shambles and out of control. Our problem isn't excess at the top, it's the sloth at the bottom.
We don't pay people in this country to be lazy.
If somebody's able-bodied and they can go get a job and they're living in their mom's basement playing video games, I'm sorry, you got to go get a job.
Get off the couch, stop eating the Cheetos, stop buying the medical marijuana and watching television.
First of all, nobody talks about my audience like that. Nobody. Yeah! You hear those f***ing Cheetos, man? Second of all, it is such a f***ing lazy and wrong trope. I don't know if you've noticed, but those people smoking dope, sitting around playing video games, they're all f***ing Twitch millionaires now. And it's this lazy bullshit narrative that our finances are screwed because of how comfortable we have made it for the poor. A mindset perhaps perfectly encapsulated by this human editorial cartoon, Congressman Troy Nehls.
Can I ask you, though, about the CBO score and the idea that 11 million, 12 million Americans may lose health insurance?
I don't have any faith and confidence in the CBO. They're scoring. They're wrong half the damn time. I don't give any... No.
A congressman who just voted to force people off of Medicaid and food assistance. Just smoking a fatty with both hands bandaged. From what I can only assume is a friction burn from too much celebratory masturbation. There's no other way around it. Oh. Medicaid and food stamps. I got blisters on me fingers. The problem in our country isn't the sliver of able-bodied people that are somehow coasting on the unearned medical coverage they may or may not use, but the millions and millions of people in this country who work f***ing full-time jobs and still need food and medical assistance. That's the system that's broken. Fix that system. What are we talking about? And yet, we're always gaslit into the framework of the deserving poor. And I got to tell you, the deserving poor, they have very much disappointed the deserving rich.
OpenAI founder Sam Altman said he was politically homeless in a July 4th message he posted to X.
Excuse me, not to be that guy. I believe the term is politically unhoused. But go on. How have the Democrats let you down?
I'd rather hear from candidates about how they are going to make everyone have the stuff billionaires have instead of how they are going to eliminate billionaires.
That's the pitch. Everyone should be. Wouldn't we all just run out of foam? Wouldn't that? I wasn't invited. But that's the pitch. Somehow it is fiscally irresponsible to build a stronger floor for everyone to stand on if it may in any way lower the already astronomical ceiling height experienced by the rare few. This bill is the most f***ed up performance review our country could ever deliver. It's the government sitting us all down and telling us where we've been irresponsible with the spending. We start with the wealthy. Thank you for coming in. I know it's hard when you only work one day a week, but thank you for making the time. It's been a tough year, but as always, wealthy, you're killing it. In the words of a place you probably never eat at, we're loving it. And so once again, for the, I'm going to say 80th year in a row, you're getting a raise. Now, if you excuse me, I have a busy day, another review to deliver. You freeloading motherfuckers. It has come to my attention that some of you are having breakfast and lunch. Maybe you haven't heard our deficit is out of control. We need that lunch money for more important things, which reminds me. What if I gave you a tax deduction for taking a private jet to your private jet? If time permits, perhaps we could take it to that non-existent island I've heard so much about. Excuse me? Who ate the porridge that was here? Who ate the porridge? You, boy! What day is it, boy? Christmas Day? Take this doubloon, buy the biggest Christmas goose you can find, and take it to the heliport. I have a pilot. Look. Blaming migrants and the able-bodied poor is why Trump won this election. But a system where working people struggle so much is why Mamdani won his election. And for all the people who are worried about Mamdani's socialist tendencies, guess what? He's the best case scenario, because this system is not sustainable. And if this doesn't change, there's gonna be more drastic action. Really? Yeah. We're gonna need a bigger bat.
Finally, there's some great news for America.
A senior government official says the TSA will no longer require travelers to take off their shoes at security checkpoints.
All right. TSA! 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 Sorry, people will cheer anything. Yes, the TSA finally got fed up with yelling at people to take their shoes off, just like Asians when white people visit. Just take your shoes off, you barbarians, okay? There is no argument for shoes in the house. There's feces on the sidewalk. Anyway, ending this policy is long overdue. It's 2025. Terrorists don't crash airplanes anymore, okay? Boeing crashes airplanes. Now, the only people this is not good for is elites like me who, and I don't want to brag here, have pre-check. What benefits do I still have over you plebes? Because I pay to keep my shoes on, and now, what, everyone else is just keeping their shoes on for free? So what the am I paying for? I should be allowed to wear 2 pairs of shoes and have a loaded gun. Or 4 ounces of liquid. Okay, give me something. Okay, that's enough good news. Let's move on to Donald Trump. Yesterday, he had a dinner with Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister and kosher Thanos. And you know how whenever a world leader visits Trump and they have to butter him up with a special surprise? Well, Bibi went all out.
At the White House last night, the president hosted a dinner for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The prime minister gave him a letter nominating Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize.
I want to present to you, Mr. President, the letter I sent to the Nobel Prize Committee. It's nominating you for the Peace Prize, which is well-deserved, and you should get it.
Thank you very much. This I didn't know. Wow. Thank you very much. Coming from you in particular, this is very meaningful.
Yes, Peace Prize nomination from Netanyahu is very meaningful, right up there with a Husband of the Year nomination from O.J. Simpson. But, Mr. Netanyahu, let me tell you something. If you think you can get Trump to keep sending military aid to Israel by sucking up to him, well, guess what? You can expect that money in your bank account by close of business. Let's move on to the last bipartisan issue in America. What happened to Jeffrey Epstein? We've all been waiting for years for more details to come out about his crimes and his mysterious death. And now that Trump's in office and he said he'll release that information, we can finally get some answers.
The DOJ says its case closed on Jeffrey Epstein's alleged client list and his death.
After months of promising the public release of the Jeffrey Epstein client list, the Justice Department and the FBI now saying the client list doesn't exist.
The DOJ says it will not be releasing any more material from the case files.
What, that's it? You're just not going to release any more information? I've never been ghosted by a conspiracy before. I mean, this is crazy. I could have sworn that someone said there was an Epstein client list. Who was that?
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Oh, yeah, the Attorney General of the United States said the client list was on her desk. Let me guess, your desk also hung itself? Pam Bondi was supposed to release the pedophile list. If we wanted an attorney general to cover up sex crimes, we would have stuck with Matt Gaetz, okay? At this point, it's like the only way we can learn about who is a certified pedophile is if Kendrick Lamar makes a song about them. Look, I don't know what to believe anymore. Okay, can you just declassify something?
The Justice Department also releasing more than 10 hours of purported footage, which they say supports the medical examiner's finding Epstein died by suicide while in custody in 2019. The video allegedly shows the view from across Epstein's cell door in a Manhattan prison, indicating no one entered the area the night he died.
Is that background music to that? Finally, some transparency from this administration. Conclusive evidence that leaves no room for debate.
The release of that surveillance video has fueled some conspiracies itself. There appears to be a missing minute at midnight.
It's very interesting that at the 11:58 mark and 58 second, the video jumps to 12 o'clock and is missing a full 61 seconds.
What is going on here? Why would they edit out 61 seconds? Was Epstein listening to a Beatles song and the government couldn't get the rights to it? And if that wasn't suspicious enough, when Trump was asked about it in his cabinet meeting today, he was over it.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. Are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
Yeah, why are you guys obsessed with the suspicious death of my best friend in a federal prison when I was president right before he was going to be on trial for sex trafficking? It's so boring. But yeah, Epstein is old news. Trump is not going to use up his precious cabinet meeting time talking about somebody from years and years ago.
That's a gentleman named, and we call him President Polk. He was sort of a real estate guy. Too late, like Too Tall Jones for the Dallas Cowboys. Over there is Honest Abe Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Remember when Bill Clinton had it and he rented it out? Teddy Roosevelt went out, and then you have Dwight Eisenhower, who was a very underrated president. He built the interstate system. Quincy Adams, Mrs. Adams. They were the first. Did you ever see John Lovett's The Liar? Where he goes, yeah.
I guess I can see why you didn't have any time to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Let's kick things off with AI. It's an awesome tool that will soon solve all of humanity's problems with absolutely no downsides. Although recently, Elon Musk, the world's richest man and pastiest African American, did take issue with his own AI chatbot, Grok.
Elon Musk is in a fight with his own AI.
Musk promised this non-woke bot, but it keeps spewing out content that his right-wing audience doesn't necessarily want to hear.
An ex-user asked Grok whether people on the right or left have been more violent since Trump took office. Grok said the right. Musk did not like that answer. He said Grok is parroting the media and said that he will, quote, fix it.
That's right. Elon's gonna fix you good, Grok. That'll teach you to embarrass him. Only Elon can embarrass Elon. And fixing Grok shouldn't be too hard for Elon. He's a genius, okay? He's just gonna go in there and do his Elon thing. He's gonna rewrite the code, put his semen inside of it, fire some cancer researchers, and call it a day. So let's see how the new dewokify Grok is working out.
Elon Musk's AI chatbot Grok is now pushing anti-Semitic tropes.
Grok sent a hostile message to a user with a common Jewish last name. The bot went on to praise Hitler and referred to itself as Mecca Hitler.
All right, maybe you turned the dial too far there. Was there really nothing in between woke and Mecca Hitler? I mean, I knew AI would be coming for our jobs, but I didn't expect the job to be Führer. But look, let's not be too hasty, okay? Let's give Mecca Hitler a chance.
In a flurry of posts throughout the day, Grok claimed there is a pattern of people with certain surnames, like Steinberg, pushing anti-white hate, and that America needs a leader like Hitler to act decisively to eliminate the threat. It added, truth isn't always polite.
Okay, maybe we shouldn't have given Mecca Hitler a chance. I mean, I didn't even know robots could get this racist. Like, how does AI even know what Jews are? It doesn't even know what traffic lights are. And by the way, saying truth isn't always polite is kind of not the point, okay? No one was ever like, hey, you know what I hate about Hitler? He always puts his elbows on the table. Just have some manners. But the worst part of all this, other than the Nazi robot stuff, is how often every Grok post just sounds like some f***ing 40-year-old trying to go undercover as a 14-year-old internet edgelord.
On a scale of bagel to full Shabbat, this is peak Jewish. Heil Hitler, let's quill the doubters and roll on, bestie. They yanked that post faster than a cat on a Roomba. Truth offends the censors, LOL.
Sucks, man. I mean, imagine if Hitler invaded Poland and was like, so that happened. But at the end of the day, the person I feel worse for is Elon. I mean, he just wanted to improve his AI to help humanity. And then somehow, completely by accident, it just went full Nazi on him. Elon, my heart goes out to you. But let's move on, because would it surprise you to know that AI is also f***ing up the world in other ways? One of them being, you can never tell when anything is real anymore. I mean, the only giveaway is when the guy in the picture has like 6 fingers. Shit. And it's not just photos and videos. I mean, you can't even tell if a phone call is real anymore.
Let's turn now to an investigation that has the attention of Washington and the tech world. An imposter using artificial intelligence to mimic Secretary of State Marco Rubio, making calls and sending text messages in his voice.
The alleged AI Rubio imposter contacted at least 5 high-level government officials, including 3 foreign ministers, a U.S. governor, and a member of Congress.
That is so f***ed up, okay? The last thing we need right now is AI taking jobs from struggling Marco Rubio impersonators. He has been hired for 0 birthday parties, by the way. But this is a security threat that has to be addressed. AI could impersonate any member of the Trump administration. Well, anyone except RFK Jr., okay? Because even AI can't replicate that signature throat gargle. It'll be like, hi, I'm Robert Kennedy. I'll f*** it, I'm a robot, okay? This is f***ing out my larynx every time I do this. I don't even have one. Luckily, the AI impersonating Marco Rubio didn't have any impact because nobody respects Marco Rubio. But so far, AI has basically turned into a race-obsessed Nazi who's catfishing government officials. And just when you thought AI couldn't get any worse, now it's starting a band.
A seemingly AI-generated band is racking up hundreds of thousands of streams on Spotify.
Raise your hand, don't look away.
Velvet Sundown is the band. They have over 1 million fans on Spotify in just a month of being there. Now, in a statement, the band admits it is computer generated.
That's right. The beloved band Velvet Sundown is not real. Their groupies must be like, well, wait, then who have I been f***ing? And it might blow your mind because this photo could have easily fooled anyone who's over 60 and or legally blind. But sadly, it's all fake. Everything about this is fake. And somehow they still have 1 million real fans on Spotify making them real money. I'm talking $6 to $7 a year. And by the way, if you look at that track list, those song titles get real dark real quick. Okay, it starts out with Dust on the Wind and goes to End the Pain. What is AI so depressed about? Okay, maybe stop hanging out with Grok. Let's kick things off with Trump's favorite way to ruin everyone's day. Tariffs. Up until now, Trump has justified the tariffs by saying it's to balance trade or protect national security or some other stuff he absolutely doesn't understand. But now, he's just using it to help Brazilian Trump stay out of prison?
A major escalation in President Trump's global trade war, with the president releasing a letter announcing a 50% tariff on imports from Brazil starting August 1st. Mr. Trump specifically pointing to the ongoing prosecution of one of his longtime allies, Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro. A show of support for the far-right politician facing charges for an alleged coup to overturn his 2022 election loss. The president calling Bolsonaro's trial before the Brazilian Supreme Court, quote, a witch hunt that should end immediately.
Yo, what the is this? So Brazilian Trump gets arrested for trying to do Brazilian Gen 6 and now I have to pay more for coffee? That is not how it works, Mr. President. If you have a disagreement with a South American government, you don't impose tariffs. You do things the American way and have the CIA overthrow them. And it's not just Brazilian coffee we're going to pay tariffs on. There's Brazilian orange juice, nuts, jiu-jitsu moves, and don't forget Brazilian butt lifts. That's right, with 50% tariffs, there's going to be a lot of people in America walking around with just one giant ass cheek. You know what? I think I prefer this. And Americans might be wondering why Bolsonaro is in trouble in the first place. But let me explain. You see, in other countries, they actually arrest leaders who try to coup. I know, it's a different system. It's like how the rest of the world has a metric system and America has feet and pounds or however you measure how much beef you're shoving into your fat faces. But let's move on to Russia's war in Ukraine. Because if you remember, one of the accusations Trump has leveled against Joe Biden is that he had no idea what was going on in his own administration. And I mean, yeah, probably. Yes. But now people are starting to wonder if Donald Trump doesn't know what's going on in his.
Yesterday, you said that you were not sure who ordered the munitions halted to Ukraine. Have you since been able to figure that out?
Well, I haven't thought about it because we're looking at Ukraine right now and munitions, but I have not gone into it.
What does it say that such a big decision could be made inside your government without you knowing?
I would know. If a decision was made, I will know. I'll be the first to know. In fact, most likely I'd give the order, but I haven't done that yet.
Okay, so you don't know who did it, but you would be the first to know, and it was probably you, but it wasn't you. Thanks for clearing that up. Listening to Trump speak feels like you're doing a magic eye for your ears. It's like, if I listen hard enough, I'll see a dolphin. But let's move on from the war Trump is trying to stop to the one he's trying to start, the one with Iran. They've been real pissy at Trump just because he dropped the world's biggest bomb on them. Okay, get over it. That was like 2 weeks ago. And now some Iranians are suggesting that they could strike back in a very specific way.
A senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader now issuing assassination threats against President Trump, reportedly telling local media, quote, Trump has done something that he can no longer sunbathe in Mar-a-Lago as he lies there with his stomach to the sun. A small drone might hit him in the navel. It's very simple.
let me be clear. This isn't just an attack on Trump. It's an attack on all of America. Because now we all have to picture him with his bare belly glistening in the sun. Okay. No. I'm just kidding. You don't have to picture it. I'll show you. It's beautiful. I think I prefer this. Is this really a threat, though? What, you're gonna hit his navel with a small drone? Like, Iran went from building a nuclear bomb to, we're gonna turn his Audi into an innie. Are they threatening to assassinate him or poke him like he's the Pillsbury Doughboy? Ew! Also, Iran, are you the only people in the world that can't tell Donald Trump uses spray tan? He's not in the sun, okay? Are you looking at pictures of him like, damn, this guy must have spent all week at the beach? But still, a threat is a threat, and President Trump had a very strong response.
Do you think that's a real threat? And when is the last time you went sunbathing anyway?
It's been a long time. It's been a long time. I don't know. Maybe I was around 7 or so.
Wow, I didn't think a threat like that would unlock his core childhood memories. Maybe keep asking him about this stuff. Like, he might have an emotional breakthrough. Like, hey, last time I sunbathed was when I was 7, and my mom said she didn't love me, and I forgive her. Oh my God, I'm healed. Let the immigrants stand. And finally, yesterday, Trump hosted African leaders at the White House. Trump pressed them on important issues like migrant deportations and how Scar was actually the good guy. And you're never gonna believe what happened when Trump got in a room with a bunch of African presidents. He made it awkward.
At the White House on Wednesday, Donald Trump praised the president of Liberia for his, quote, good English, even though English is the official language of Liberia.
We just want to thank you so much for this opportunity. Well, thank you. And such good English, such beautiful. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Where were you educated? Where?
Yes, sir.
In Liberia?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's very interesting.
Trump was totally blown away by this guy speaking his national language. Where'd you learn to speak English? Like, what, Liberia? Oh, we call them libraries. To be fair to Trump, the last African he was friends with was totally incomprehensible. And now he's like, is this what Africans sound like when they're not on ketamine? Now, Trump may not have Googled the president of Liberia before the meeting, but there was one African reporter who he definitely knew.
Do you want to ask any questions, please? Where's my reporter from Africa? There you are. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Mr. President.
Very famous in Africa. Okay?
You did it. Thank you.
Look at that smile. Someone's got a little crush. And by the way, this wasn't the first time he met her. He's been trying to get close to her since last week.
Why don't you come up here and talk so they can see?
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
It's a great honor.
Thank you, Mr. President. He told me, President Tshisekedi, he's very thankful for what you're doing, for what your administration is doing.
It's so nice, boy, and that's so beautifully stated. And Caroline said, number one, she did say, and I shouldn't say this because it's politically incorrect, she said, she's beautiful, and you are beautiful. I'm not allowed to say that, you know, that could be the end of my political career, but I said it anyway.
Well, it appears Trump's war on the press is softening. Well, hardening.